Nebraska range and pasture conditions improved last week, with 18% now in good or excellent condition. But almost 40% of the state's range and pasture is still in poor or very poor shape, and it's probably a safe bet that most of that is in the western half. We talked with Berger in Kimball Wednesday about the prospects for cattle on that land and how this area has recently fared in rainfall.
Precipitation has been really variable through the spring. Some areas have gotten some and other areas haven't, and so it's kind of a have and have-nots. We did get some moisture in late April and early May, and so that helped the cool season grass get started. One of the challenges is with the drought that we had last summer, and we're still with that. We saw a lot of grass that, even if it was managed well, we saw quite a bit of dieback and reduction in vigor. So even our cool season production, I think this year is maybe half of long-term average. And so as people are thinking about stocking for this summer and thinking about how long they leave cattle out and rotations, need to take that into account and just realize we're going to be short on grass even with some of the precipitation we've had.
With those dead plants, it's not an option to reseed in that?
Yeah, really reseeding in native range is a waste of money. And so if you have some weedy species, it is important to pay attention to those, especially for folks who maybe brought hay in from other locations last year that might have weeds. Now is a really good time to be watching for those, things like leafy spurge, Canada thistle. Those could be coming up, especially in pastures maybe they fed on. But going in and seeding into a pasture really has no value if you have a decent stand there of native plants that can come back and really fill in those spaces.
On average, what have producers done here with their herds? How far have they cut back?
I think on average probably we're looking at a reduction around 30%. A lot of folks have worked hard to hold on to their cow herd, their base cow herd. And so a lot of folks have turned out. I still think this year early weaning is going to be a good option as a way to reduce forage demand, to try to stretch those forage supplies as much as possible. One of the advantages of this year, I think, maybe compared to next year, is the corn belt's got a lot of good moisture. And so some of these ethanol co-products are a little more cost competitive in terms of a feed resource than they were in the past. Out here, wheat harvest is about ready to start, and so there may be some wheat straw available. The opportunity to feed some ethanol co-products or soy hulls with some wheat straw, if we need to get cattle off of pasture, especially to some cows, I think might be a good fit this year.
How far are you looking at early weaning? I mean, how early are we talking?
Yeah, really we can early wean calves as short as 60 days, but probably somewhere around that 80 to 110 days is really where it's a good fit. And so I think if you know you're going to be short on feed, just looking now at what your demand is and what you have available to you, you start to make some of those decisions. Especially some of these young cows, 2s and 3s, really can benefit from an early weaning type situation, allow them to get some body condition score back. And so I think those are things to put in your planning as you think about going through the summer.
Still anything to remember with time out grazing on that range?
Yeah, so as we think about these pastures and the range land, and especially those that have been stressed, anything we can do to defer grazing during the active growing season is going to help that pasture recover. That doesn't mean we can't graze it at all, but if we can avoid grazing those species when they're actively growing, we really can help the vigor of those plants. So for us in this area, we're pretty dominantly cool season. You get north and east of here in the Sandhills, this warm season. So we're looking at deferring grazing anything from May through July, August, into September. Once we get into a killing frost, then there's really not any detriment to going out and grazing those dormant plants, but anything we can do to defer grazing will help those pastures going forward, especially during the growing season.
For a farmer or rancher who might think about trying to substitute in wheat or the ethanol co-products, what do you recommend they look at before they switch into that diet?
Yeah, so as you think about some alternatives to some pasture, I think obviously it comes down to cost and looking at what's the total cost of that ration meeting that cow's nutrient requirements. And so I think it's looking at what you have available on hand, thinking about what might be the best fit, the equipment you have, the resources you have to deliver that feed, where those cows are at in terms of their nutrient requirements. So there's a lot of pieces that you want to put together as you consider your options. There's a lot of educators and specialists available that can help producers who are considering their options work through some of those things and make sure they have a ration that meets their desired goals.